Welcome to Geo College Radio. I'm Miles King, joined as always by Jordan Lunderman. Welcome, Jordan. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Miles. I'm getting to stay home this whole week for Thanksgiving break, so I'm very thankful for that, and I'm excited to get to spend some time with my family and some friends I haven't seen in a while, like you. So.
Oh, excellent. Yes, I will be in town. I'm still in Stillwater right now. It'll be heading back Tuesday night. So we'll definitely have to see each other this week. It's been a while.
It has.
But it's nice to be able to talk some college football on the podcast every week. It's been real enjoyable.
Definitely, yeah. I'm ready for hopefully a little bit more exciting week next week as compared to this week.
Well, I think we've got one lined up, but let's go ahead and talk about this week. Our first game we're going to talk about, I was in Fort Worth for this one. The Cowboys, in dominant fashion, beat the TCU Horned Frogs 31-6. It was close at halftime, only 10-6, but there was no doubt once the second half kicked off. It was a absolutely dominating performance by OSU heading into their bye week before the de facto Big 12 title game against OU. And Jordan, you called this, so I will say congratulations on predicting the big win for the Pokes.
Yeah, thank you. And like I said last week, I thought that the James Washington was going to be the big hero for the Cowboys, and that wasn't the case. Chris Lacey stepped up big time. He only had 4 receptions, but it seemed like every catch was just a huge momentum swing for Oklahoma State. But really what it came down to in this game was the dominant rushing attack from Justice Hill and Chris Carson, who just ran all over TCU. And anytime you can do that, you're going to beat the Horned Frogs. That seems to be their Achilles heel all year, whether it was the Arkansas game or now the OSU game, and of course their other 3 losses. It allowed Oklahoma State to not lose the time of possession battle. And while it was close, it seemed like TCU was wanting to really control the clock. And at times, it seemed like they cared more about the clock than they did about scoring in any way that they could. So it was just an all-around dominant performance by the offensive line of Oklahoma State, who we had been talking about as underwhelming at the beginning of the year, and now since about halfway through the year, they've really come on, and this defense that's stepping up as well.
Yeah, I was very impressed with the run game of the Cowboys. Chris Carson and Justice Hill are coming on as to rival Joe Mixon and Samaje Perine as potentially the best 1-2 punch in the Big 12. You've got the lightning of Justice Hill and the thunder of Chris Carson, and which was best emphasized on that highlight at the end of the game where he truck sticked 2 straight TCU defenders. That was pretty wild. But you're right. We got to give kudos to this O-line. This was, I think, by far the best game they've had in the last 3 years, ever since Wickline left. They played outstanding, dominated the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball, OSU offensive line and the OSU defensive line. It felt like every time TCU ran the ball, they just got stuffed over and over and over. And I think you saw the depth of the OSU offensive line really starting to pay off and come through in this game. Usually at this point in the season, especially last year, we had a really tired defense. Guys were a little bit banged up because they're out there so much. And now I think you're beginning to see the benefits of having a deep defensive line where you just do hockey line changes every couple of plays and bring on a whole new line.
Yeah, and speaking of not just having the depth that they have on the defensive line, but probably the most dominant defensive lineman in the Big 12, maybe even in the country, Vincent Taylor, he has had insane numbers these past few weeks, and whether it's been just racking up a lot of tackles or just his presence and forcing people to run away from this monster of a man, he's been incredible pretty much all season. And he had 2 solo tackles for loss. Anytime you can get in the backfield, just as one guy and disrupt the defense that much, you're really making your presence known. And it changes play calling a lot of the time because you don't want to run it at him. And you have to double team him at times, which frees up a linebacker that could blitz or a defensive lineman that could run a stunt. And just his presence on the defensive line has definitely proven its worth as the season's gone along.
Absolutely. I think he is definitely in the conversation for Big 12 Defensive Player of the Year. which would be the first time a defensive lineman had won it since Ndamukong Suh in 2009. But now he has 4 blocked kicks on the year, which ties an OSU single season record. He's like you said, he's just a man in the trenches. He's dominating whoever he lines up against. You can't stop him. He's getting into the backfield every single game, making plays. Even if he's not getting the tackle, if you can get in the backfield and disrupt the play, like you said, it changes play calling. It blows up the play. So it's been really great to see him come out and just have a dominant season like he has. And his supporting cast has really stepped up and played very well.
Yeah, and like you said earlier, something about the Oklahoma State special teams defense, people need to really take notice of that. Had this game been a close game, that blocked PAT or missed PAT could have really changed the entire landscape of the game. So kudos to him, and 4 on the year is just incredible. So I would probably have to submit my ballot for Vincent Taylor as Defensive Player of the Year. It's not over yet. He's going to need a big game against the Sooners in 2 weeks, but I'm sure he's going to be well prepared for that, and the defense is going to be prepared as a whole.
Absolutely. There's no better game you'd want them to have than to come in and just completely shut down the Horned Frogs, get some confidence going into Bedlam. And like you said, I think I said this earlier, but his 4th block of the season. And after the season opener against Southeastern Louisiana, he had a blocked PAT, and in the post game he said, his goal for the season was 6 blocked kicks. And I was sitting there, I was like, well, that's just completely ridiculous. But here we are, still have Bedlam and the bowl game to go, and it's he could definitely get to those 6 blocked kicks. Would just be an insane number. Hopefully he gets both of those in 2 weeks in Norman.
Definitely. And if Oklahoma State wins against OU and there's a little bit more chaos ahead of them in the polls, you might have 2 games in the postseason that he could get the opportunity to block those kicks. So
I like the way you're thinking, Jordan.
We're hoping for the best.
I like that. Yes. Hey, we've had I called it a few weeks ago on the show, half jokingly at the time, but I'm starting to look a little bit like a prophet now. There are still a few things that needs to happen for OSU. Washington either needs to lose this week or in their conference title game against whoever they play. We need Michigan to win out, beat Ohio State, and win the Big Ten. But really, other than that gives them a great chance to make it to the title game.
Yeah, and later in the show, I'm going to run through basically my doomsday scenario for a college football playoff. So you can look forward to that as you're listening to this. But we'll get to that in a little bit, and I'll have to see what you think about that.
Yeah, I'll be excited to hear that. But wrapping up this game, the story really was the dominant rushing attack of the Cowboys, running for 334 yards, and the defense holding TCU to 6 points, their lowest total since 1998. Outstanding performance from the Cowboys, and hopefully they can duplicate this in 2 weeks' time for the Big 12 title in Norman. Now let's go on. Arkansas defeated Mississippi State 58-42 in Starkville. This one, it's a little bit higher scoring than I would have expected, but a good win for the Razorbacks. It would have been very bad for them to lose to Dan Mullen and his team. They haven't had a great year except for their upset of Texas A&M. But what was this game like? Was it ever in doubt, or did Arkansas pretty much have control of the game?
You know, in the first half, there's a little bit of doubt. Our defense had trouble stopping Nick Fitzgerald on those long runs. He had 2 big touchdown runs, 58 yards, and then an 18-yarder. But we seemed in control on offense, and I didn't think we were going to lose the game, but I was just wondering, when were we going to get a stop? And going back to the offensive side of the ball, Raleigh Williams had a huge game. He had 195 yards, or 191 yards on 8 carries in the first half, with 4 touchdowns. And we didn't really play him as much in the second half. He ended up with 205 yards, and he even had a passing touchdown. We had a little pop pass on a 4th and goal on the 1. But everyone really, they chipped in well. Austin Allen got back on his feet after having a couple of bad games in a row, granted against the Florida defense and LSU defense. So good defenses, but he needs to learn to step up against that kind of competition. And it seems like he got back on track a little bit. Again, this isn't the best defense in the world. They're, I believe, 117th in pass defense. So it was just good to see him get back on track. But the story in this game is very similar to Oklahoma State. Not on the defensive side of the ball, but we really controlled the time of possession, and our rushing attack was just dominant all game. And so it was good to see that. A huge second quarter from the Hogs. We had 24 unanswered points. So really it was the first quarter that was questionable. And then from then on, I felt pretty confident about our chances, especially at the half at 38-14. But this is an Arkansas team that throughout the season, they've had a lot of bright spots, but also a lot of just horrible pits of darkness in the middle of the season, if I can call it that. I don't even know what to say about it. But come bowl season, they're going to want a team that they're hopefully overrated, and we get a much worse team in the bowl, because it really we don't seem to be very consistent in our attack. So I'm hoping that this game and our rushing attack here and the way our offensive line played translates into the Missouri game next week, and then hopefully against a team that has a worse defense than we've been playing on average all year, so that we can put up similar numbers as this game and just continue to get that rushing attack going.
Yeah, and it was just, you're right, an absolute dominant performance on the ground for nearly 360 yards, almost 9 yards a carry. Whenever you just control the line of scrimmage like that, you control the time of possession, you just keep the ball away from the other team, it's hard to come back from that, especially whenever you get a couple stops in a row and then you score every possession. It's hard for the other team to come back from that. But like you said, this Arkansas team, they're a team with talent, with bright spots, but also there are times you can see kind of their glaring weaknesses. Hopefully, another year under Brett Bielema, they correct some of those. They become more consistent. I guess their problem is that they're just not very consistent week to week. You have you go get destroyed at Auburn, 56-3. Was that the score?
Yeah, I don't want to talk about it.
56-3. Come back the next week, beat a Florida team which beat LSU this week and beat them very soundly. The next week, get dominated on the ground by LSU, and now you come out and completely control the game and beat Mississippi State. So what the Hogs are going to have to do from now on to improve in the next few years is just improve their week-to-week consistency. If you ever want to compete for SEC West and ultimately SEC titles, you're going to have to be able to perform consistently week to week and not just have a great performance every other week and then just have an awful, horrid performance every other week.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with that. One bright spot, though, and I was thinking about it, thinking back to the game, I didn't remember very many penalties, and so I looked up the stats on that. There were only 4 penalties the whole game and 0 turnovers, so it was a very clean game from the Hogs and from the Bulldogs. But if we can just keep the turnover margin at 0 or better and limit our penalties, that's going to do wonders for us. And speaking of penalties, I don't know if you saw the Houston-Louisville game this week, but that was one of the worst, most highly penalized games I've ever seen.
You stole my transition right out of my mouth. It was one of the worst, one of the least disciplined performances I've ever seen from a football team. I will go that far to say that.
Wow.
If you didn't watch the game, you'll just cringe hearing this. Louisville, 15 penalties, 114 yards. I mean, you don't win any games if you're blowing your foot off like that.
Wow. It seems like you'd have to have some sort of coaching, but that has to fall on the coaches. It seems like maybe they had a game plan going into the game, but on the way there, I guess their head coach fell off their motorcycle and suffered some head trauma. And
did he happen to have a college co-ed on the back of it?
I believe he did, if I remember correctly. And it's a weird story. I haven't heard anything like it before. No, it was great to see Louisville lose, and especially in that way. Now, I'm rooting for Lamar Jackson to do well. I love his game and how he plays, but nothing satisfies me more than seeing Bobby Petrino blow the season with clearly the best player in the country on his team. And with 2 losses and almost no way, or actually at this point, no way to get to the ACC title game now, it was great to see him blow the season for them. He's not going to be gone. So I do want Lamar Jackson to do well. Maybe next year if they get to the title game, I want him to get there, have a huge game, and then Bobby Petrino blow a call or two, and they lose the game. But getting back to the game itself, actually no, I'm going to talk a little bit more about how much I hate Bobby Petrino. He really made our program look bad and left us with John L. Smith for a year. One of the worst coaches ever. At least
John
D1.
L. Smith era.
That's not an
I remember
era.
the good old John L.
I don't remember.
Oh.
I don't want to remember that anymore. I want to get that out of my head. But now I'm kind of glad that happened because we have a high character guy now. But actually, getting back to the game, Houston just dominated the whole game, and Louisville didn't have a whole lot of bad plays exactly, but it just seemed like anytime they got something going, a penalty would stop their progress. So a disciplined game from the Cougars. Greg Ward gets back on track, and a little bit of luck from Houston at some points in the game. They didn't really need it, but they had a fake punt pass that was completed, and then on the same drive, a tip ball drill into the end zone. It was the most improbable catch I've ever seen. So just a great performance. Credit to the Cougars. And in your face, Louisville, specifically Bobby Petrino.
Yeah, Bobby Petrino, while he is a scumbag, he is definitely doing much better than John L. Smith. John L. Smith, after, I can't even believe this, after coaching the Arkansas Razorbacks in the SEC East, went on to coach the Fort Lewis Skyhawks in the Rocky Mountain Athletic Conference for 3 years. Do you know what division the Fort Lewis Skyhawks are in?
I believe they're Division II, but
yes,
but that's they're in a conference for the blind. So,
and can you guess his record? 3 years at the Fort Lewis Skyhawks in the conference for the blind in Division II.
Well, I'm not sure if they play the same number of games in Division II, but I'm gonna guess that it's gonna be something really good. Let's say 29-7.
14-19.
Oh, wow.
14. The man who was the head coach of Arkansas went 14-19, and this year he was the head coach of the Kentucky State Thoroughbreds, and he went 1-3.
1-3.
I'm not sure. 1-3. I'm not sure if he was fired mid-season. What exactly happened there? There was no other data.
Wow.
Wikipedia still says he's the head coach.
I think
maybe they picked him up mid-season.
I believe he was abducted by an alien race. I'm not exactly sure. Those are the reports that came out. We'll see. I haven't heard from him. One thing I will say about him, though, he was a really nice guy. And that's not all you want from a football coach, but it is good to have a high character guy coaching your kids. Thankfully, we have a good coach now that's also a high character guy. Same with Oklahoma State and also Houston, but not Louisville. Louisville has the scum of the earth.
No. Well, we'll come off the John L. Smith tangent and wrap this game up real quick. But like you said, Louisville was just completely unprepared. If there's this many penalties, it has to go on the coaching staff because there was literally a false start every 3 plays. I think if you went and broke it down, you would find a false start every 3 plays. They were that numerous. Sloppy by the Cardinals. They fumbled on the opening kickoff, allowed Houston to score. And just overall, it was a dominating performance by Houston, especially Ed Oliver on the defensive line. He was in the backfield almost every single play, it seemed like.
Yeah, he had 2 sacks and 3 tackles for loss. So, and not to mention Stephen Taylor, who racked up 14 total tackles. Those 2 guys were running all over the field like crazy, and they really carried the defense. Not that the defense needed carrying because they played well as a unit, but they had the lion's share of the tackles. So, props to them.
Yeah. Great game by Houston. That was another event that needed to happen for Oklahoma State's playoff hopes. They needed a Louisville loss, and now they have it. Let's go on to another team which OSU might be battling against to get in the playoff. And I tell you what, this team survived a scare, and you also predicted this would be a close game on the banks of the Little Red Cedar in Michigan. Ohio State barely survived against Michigan State 17-16. Michigan State, with 5 minutes left in the game, scored what everybody thought was going to be the game-tying touchdown. Instead, they elect to go for 2 with 5 minutes left in the game. They don't get it, and that was that. And Ohio State held on to win.
Yeah, and I was sitting in my living room during this part of the game, and I wanted them to go for 2 there, just because you're the underdog. You're really not supposed to be in this position, so why not try and steal the victory? You're not the better team. You're probably going to lose in overtime if it gets that far, so just go for the victory. But that had to be one of the worst play calls I've ever seen, and one of the worst executions of the play. There's one point, just about a second after the play had started, where there was a quick slant. The guy was wide open, and Tyler O'Connor looked right at him and waited for probably a second and a half to throw it. And in that second and a half, 3 defenders congregated in the area, and he threw one of the most beautiful passes directly to the chest of the safety. It was really an amazing pass, just not the right team, unfortunately for him. And of course, after that happened, I'm thinking, why didn't they go for 1? But it made sense to go for 2 in that situation. Really, the only reason they were even in this game was it wasn't to the credit of Tyler O'Connor at all. Their whole saving grace for the entire year has been, or I guess you can't really call it saving grace if they're 3-8, but at least for this game, was L.J. Scott, who had a screen pass for a touchdown at the beginning of the game, and then he just pretty much manhandled them in the run game for the entire game. So props to him. It sucks that he didn't really have a quarterback doing anything except for throwing chest passes to the other team, but it was a well-fought effort, and yeah, I did say that I thought this one would be close. I was hoping that they would pull it off, but in the end, this does give a worse reputation to Ohio State, and it gives Oklahoma State a better chance and a smaller avenue, or a bigger avenue, I apologize, to get into the playoff.
Yeah, and I mean, would just be perfectly clear, Michigan State has been bad this year. They've been very bad.
Yes.
And so I was very surprised and quite impressed with them that they were able to hang this close and make it a game against Ohio State. But like you said, this is not a good look for Ohio State. They're ranked number 2, and they struggle against coming into the game, a 3-7 team. I mean, I don't know how, if you're the committee, you can, if they don't even win their division, because if they beat Michigan and they win their division, how you're supposed to say they're one of the top teams in the nation because of the eye test if they're playing a game like this late in the season. If you don't even win your division and you barely beat Michigan State by 1 point, I don't see how you're able to get into the playoff. But of course, the committee will probably put them in anyway against my best wishes.
Yeah, and I guess I'll go ahead and jump into my doomsday scenario. I'll make it quick. But like you're saying, the number one criteria, I don't know if you know this, the number one criteria for the College Football Playoff Committee is a conference championship. So whenever you see an Ohio State team that has no chance of winning the conference championship, that should mean that they have no chance of getting in. So let's say that they hold to that and that the conference championship, you have to have that to get into the playoff. So Ohio State is excluded, and I'm going to keep only teams 1 from 11 with the chance to get in. So that's Alabama to Oklahoma State, and this is a doomsday scenario. This isn't what I think is going to happen, but Miles, you'll enjoy this.
Yes.
So Ohio State is out of the playoff no matter what. If they went out, it doesn't matter. They're out. Let's say they beat Michigan. Then Michigan does not get to go to the title game. So now Ohio State is out, Michigan's out, and you're down to Penn State versus Wisconsin. Let's say Penn State wins that game. So they're now the conference champion a 2-loss conference champion, though. So that's very hard to keep them in. So you have an iffy Penn State team. I will just say that Alabama's going to be in because that's pretty much going to happen.
That's a guarantee. They could lose their last 2 games, and they probably would still make it.
Right. So let's say Alabama's in. We'll keep Penn State on the outside looking in for now. Clemson has the title, but let's say that they lose to North Carolina or Virginia Tech. So they're out. Louisville's out because they lost to Houston. All right, and then you have, from the Pac-12, you have Washington. And they have the Apple Cup, so if they lose that game, Washington State makes the title. If they win that game, then they go on to, in all likelihood, play Colorado, unless Colorado loses their last game, which is not likely to happen. They're playing Utah, so it'll be a tough matchup. But anyways, let's say they get Colorado and they lose that game. Basically, if they lose either one of those games, they're out. So let's take Washington out of the running. So now you have Alabama, and then Penn State is second. You have Oklahoma. Let's say Oklahoma loses to Oklahoma State. Then Oklahoma is removed. They're no longer the conference champion. Both Oklahoma State and OU control their own destiny, so it comes down to this last game. Nothing else in the Big 12 matters at this point. So let's say Oklahoma State beats OU, and then you have Colorado. Let's have them win the Pac-12 championship. So that makes the college football playoff look like Alabama at number 1, Penn State at number 2, Colorado at number 3, and Oklahoma State at number 4, which 3 of those teams were not even thought of to make the playoff at all. Oklahoma State, you could have made an argument that they would have a good season, but I don't think many people put them in the playoff.
Nobody would have predicted that.
And this isn't too much of a doomsday scenario. A lot of those things are very likely to happen. So, Miles, you should have some faith in your Pokes to get into the game.
There definitely is a chance. I think on 538, their chances right now are at 29%.
That's pretty decent.
Yeah, if they beat OU and if Washington loses either to Washington State or in the Pac-12 title game, those jump up to 55%. And if they get Michigan winning out, then that jumps them to 69%, I believe. So only a few scenarios, and their chances to get into the playoff increase dramatically. So it's not out of the realm of possibility. There still needs some help, but thank you for that doomsday scenario. What I would be really interested in is if Washington State wins the Pac-12 title, and what they would do with a 3-loss Washington State who lost to an FCS team earlier in the year.
I think at that point you would slot if Louisville were still in contention, you would slot them in, but you might even have to slot a conference lose or someone that like an Ohio State or a Michigan who didn't win their division since they've played so well this year. But of course, that's assuming Penn State gets to the title. So either Ohio State or Michigan will likely get in if Washington or Colorado does not win the Pac-12 title.
All right, now let's move on to what was going to be the game of the week in the Big 12. Lots of hype going around with this, and it was quickly put out. There was snow at the beginning of the game. It looked cold and miserable, and that's exactly what the West Virginia fans who were at this game experienced. OU throttled West Virginia 56-28. Just a complete beatdown. West Virginia, to give them credit, they fought back. They made a nice little run towards the end of the game, closed it to a 13-point gap, but OU pulled away, ended up winning by 28. And it was just a beatdown. And not to say that West Virginia played absolutely terrible. They just made horrible mistakes. On the very first drive, OU punted. West Virginia muffed the punt. OU recovers, goes down and scores a touchdown. Twice, West Virginia fumbled inside the 5-yard line when they were about to punch it in. So just inexcusable errors that if you're going to be competing for a Big 12 title, you can't commit.
Yeah, and I'll have to disagree with you on one point. You said that the West Virginia fans were cold and miserable. They were gone by the end of the first quarter for the most part. So most of them were in the comfort of their own homes by the third quarter, I would say. which is unfortunate, but that's pretty much how it happened.
Yeah, I believe there actually was a traffic jam around the stadium during the first half because of how many West Virginia fans left the game.
Which that's really sad. I'm always someone that stays till the end, and I stayed to the end of the LSU game and the Alabama game, which were both at home. So that tells you how dedicated I am to stay to the end, because those were not even close by the end. But West Virginia had a better offensive outing than Oklahoma did. Whenever you look at how they used their time, they were dominated on time of possession, but the time that they had, they really made use of. And Jordan Crawford had 331 rushing yards, so he was pretty much the one-man workhorse for the team. But like you said, it was those critical mistakes at critical periods of time. 4 turnovers against a top 10 team, you're not going to get it done that way, unless you're Ole Miss, Alabama, whenever Alabama almost won a couple years ago. But it's not hardly ever going to happen. So
Yeah.
It was a good game. Other than those very low points, they gave themselves a chance, like you said, at the end. But Oklahoma quickly put those to rest. So a good game from the Sooners, and they should be ready for Bedlam.
Yeah, and to give OU credit, they went in a hostile environment. It was going to be crazy. There were going to be couches burning all over the place in West Virginia, and they came in and took care of business. It was a good performance by the offense. Their offense is on fire right now, possibly the hottest one in college football. Samaje Perine and Joe Mixon continue their good play. But like you said, whenever you have somebody on your team that runs for over 330 yards, the average is almost 14 yards a carry, and you're not even competitive. You just did something horribly wrong, and that's what West Virginia did this game. They just kept themselves out of it. They had no discipline. They didn't know how to handle the big stage, and OU did.
Yeah, and I think I said Jordan Crawford earlier. I meant to say Justin Crawford, but he had to be. I don't know if they released the Players of the Week, but I would have given him the Big 12 Player of the Week honors if I were on that committee. But he had a great game. You just can't do it by yourself, like you said. Whenever you're given coughing up the ball so much against a top 10 team, none of which he had to do with. So it was really sad or only one he had to do with it, but it was really sad for West Virginia to lose in that fashion, and for all their fans to pretty much give up on them so early in the game.
Yep. Now let's move on to the game in the Swamp that had to be rescheduled. Not the Swamp, I should say the Bayou. This was in Death Valley. But this was a game that could have seen Coach O's hopes of becoming the permanent head coach of the Tigers effectively killed, as Florida beat LSU 16-10 on a last-second goal line stand. And this one, it was ugly, but the Gators got it done.
Yeah, and Florida's goal line defense has been incredible all year. If you're going to score on these guys, you need to be at least outside of the 10 and hope for a big play, because anytime you get inside the 5, it's going to be ugly. I remember playing against Arkansas. We would get inside the 5 and we'd be running the ball over and over and over again, trying to get in the end zone, similar to an Alabama-like defense whenever it comes to stopping the run. And we couldn't do anything. So we had to rely on chunk plays and passes in the red zone to get us into the end zone. And LSU is just not built on that. They're almost entirely a running team with a little bit of passing here and there. Danny Etling's coming on a little bit, but he's not coming along as fast as they need him to, especially whenever you're playing against a team that defends the run so well. So
Yeah.
A great rush defense from Florida, and a slightly better showing from Austin Appleby. Still, he's not doing great, but he's doing enough to help the Gators to a victory with their stable of running backs that usually get it done.
Yeah, and Austin Appleby had 144 yards, and one of those came on a 98-yard touchdown throw where the receiver did most of the work. But leading up to that, LSU got inside the 5. They were stuffed at the goal line, so they brought out the field goal team. and there was a bad snap, and they couldn't get the field goal off, so they had to just heave it in the end zone. It was incomplete. Very next play, Florida goes 98 yards for the touchdown. So huge momentum swing caused by the defense getting a goal line stand, and then them stepping up and winning the ball game for them there at the end.
Yeah, and I have a little bit of sore feelings after that touchdown because Arkansas and Florida were competing to get Tyree Cleveland for their respective teams, and he ended up choosing Florida. So I was a little upset to not see him come to us, but he's clearly making a strong impact for the team. He had 124 of Austin Appleby's 144 passing yards. So really a great solo performance by him and then by the running backs. But it all comes down to the defense and their incredible goal line stand, keeping Darius Geis from getting in at the last moments of the game. It's absolutely incredible. You don't really see goal line stands at the very end of the game like that very often. So it was good to see the defense show up and really force the issue, make sure that LSU had to work really hard to get into the end zone, and they ended up not getting in. So a great game by the Gators.
Mm-hmm. And it is a little bit unfortunate knowing how much Coach O likes his job as LSU head coach. He's a great guy, but looks like he'll be out the door this year. You can't lose 2 games as interim coach and probably keep your job. But, yeah. Great win by Florida. They clinch the SEC East, and they'll be heading to the title game where they can get destroyed by Alabama. All right, now our last game we're going to talk about has no relevance to the national stage whatsoever. However, it was historical for a variety of reasons. In Lawrence, Kansas, for the first time in 2 years, Kansas won an FBS football game against an FBS team. They defeated the Texas Longhorns for the first time since 1939. Maybe 38 or 39. Either way.
That's World War II.
Yes,
pre-World War II. Just around, yeah. That's insane.
And just like the Florida LSU game kind of sealed Coach O's fate, there is no doubt that Charlie Strong is out at Texas. This was an embarrassing performance from them. It's inexcusable to lose to Kansas like this.
Yeah, and so hitting on Charlie Strong a little bit, I saw that he was fired, and then Adam Schefter and maybe Mortensen confirmed it, and then later I saw a report that Charlie Strong said that he hadn't heard anything from the university, that he was fired. He wasn't sure what the deal was, so I'm not sure exactly what's going on with Charlie Strong, but I believe he was fired, and if he wasn't, he's going to be eventually. I did see that Brett Bielema reached out to Charlie Strong, and he texted him and said something affirming, just letting him know that he's a good guy and a good coach, and telling him that he'll get back on his feet somewhere. I think Bielema is hoping that Strong gets back on his feet as the defensive coordinator at Arkansas. I mean, that'd be a huge pickup for the Hogs.
Would be quite the coup to get Charlie Strong as the D coordinator. He is a defensive guru, even if his teams the last couple of years haven't looked the part.
Yeah.
But this was great for Kansas. I'm not a huge fan of Texas, so I always like when they lose. But I just felt bad for Charlie Strong. He's a great guy. I think he's a great coach, just in a bad situation. And it was tough watching the post-game presser. I don't know if you saw this with the reporter just asked him what he thought. Did he know what this meant for his future? And he just kind of had to look down and said, no, he didn't. And just tough to watch because he is a good guy. He loves his players. He wants to make them into good men first. Just like earlier we were talking, Gundy, Bielema, John L. Smith, all great character guys. But, I mean, winning talks, and winning is what's the most important. And if you're not going to win at Texas, you're not going to be around for very long.
Yeah, and I was conflicted. I did want Kansas to win this game. Like you said, I'm not a big fan of Texas, but I am a fan of Charlie Strong. So we both know he's going to land on his feet somewhere He might get a head coaching job at a smaller school and then jump back up, or he could go to some bigger school and get a coordinator position. I'm sure a lot of people would be happy to hire him, but also, like you said, he inherited a dumpster fire whenever Mac Brown left. So he's done what he could, and he's got to be happy with his work. Hopefully, he gets picked up quickly and he's able to get back up to a team of relevance and make a difference for him.
Yeah, here's hoping that Brett Bielema convinced him to come on as the DC for the Razorbacks.
Yeah, we're all hoping that.
All right, thank you guys for listening this week. It's been fun. We're coming to the end of the season, but we're closing strong. Unlike Charlie Strong.
Ouch.
That was yeah. There's your burn, Charlie. Sorry about that. But once again, thank you for listening. Jordan, thank you for joining me again.
Absolutely. It's fun every week.
Yes, and be sure to be on the lookout for later in the week. After you're done eating the turkey and mashed potatoes, you get some pumpkin pie. Be looking for that podcast Thursday or Friday, so you can be tuned in and know what to look for this weekend of college football. We got some big-time matchups coming up.
And we'll talk about some games from Friday, so you'll want to listen to it before the games on Friday.
Yes, but as always, thank you for listening. We'll see you later in the week.